outdoors in Pennsylvania and beyond. Brought to you by the Mariana Outdoorsmen Association and by Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds. Now, the great outdoors with Jason White.
Hello, friends. I'm Jason White. Welcome to the show today. Really excited to have some special guests. State Representative Ryan Warner of the 52nd District and also Mark Caskey, owner of Steel Nation. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. Jason.
Thanks for coming out. We're going to dive right into it. We have a little bit of a diverse conversation today. I know I've talked to both of you in detail in the past when it comes to permitting, and I was actually lucky enough recently, I got to interview for the board of directors for the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, and one of the things I was asked was specifically about permitting. And they were asking me like what would be my goals and aspirations as a commissioner. One of the things I know I've talked to both of you about this in different capacities of government, and the permitting in Pennsylvania is atrocious. And I literally sat there and they asked me, they were like, well, can you explain to us how you'd fix it? And I literally said, well, A to Z. I sat there for probably 15 minutes and went detailed about it. They were like, do you know that nobody's ever came here and did what you just did, and none of us have actually done the permitting process that you're referring to? And I was like, well, I think it's important that people that are making rules and regulations and laws should understand the gravity of what we're proposing. But one of the things I know, not only to make life easier on everybody, but Mark, you and the representative, I know, have dealt with this, but the RGGI has been something. Reggie, can you tell people about yourself, Mark, where your footprint is and how, and then we can dive into how the representative's dealing with that. But I know the government is wanting to add more regulations when it comes to the industries.
Absolutely. So I'm Mark Caskey. I'm the founder of Steel Nation. We're located in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. We're an oil and gas service company, so we build gas compressor stations, transmission stations, metering buildings, well site compression. Even when you get into the public utilities, we do a lot of upgrades because we're looking at 100-year-old pipe and things like that. So mainly we're in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, and the Marcellus and Utica shales. But our work takes us to Texas, Oklahoma, California, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, some of the other natural gas states where we're drilling in. What I get involved politically, Jason, and we've talked about it before, is there's something called RGGI that Pennsylvania's been trying to put in for many years now. So RGGI is a regional greenhouse gas emissions initiative. Okay, so there's 11 states, mostly to the east of us. If you look down to Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, all the way up the East Coast, New York, Boston, or not Boston, Massachusetts, everywhere surrounding us, including New York State, West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania are not part of it. Okay, and what it is, it's carbon trade-off. It started about 10 years ago with the inception of the Marcellus Shale, since we started directional drilling more 14, 15 years ago, but Reggie came in about 10 years ago. Their big push is to really tax the states that are producing all of this carbon emissions. So why do they desperately want Pennsylvania involved, because Pennsylvania produces more energy than every one of those 11 states. So who's going to front the bill? We are. Unfortunately, Governor Shapiro has it in his budget this year for something like $642 million. And it's not even passed. We're not part of that group at all. So I don't, or actually next year's budget, I misspoke a little bit. And where it really gets me, I was appointed to the Pennsylvania DEP Citizen Advisory Council and Environmental Quality Board 8 years ago, and I spent 6 years on the board working with a lot of issues, not just oil and gas, but agricultural, fish and game, those type of things. The members, when I joined, it was a good mix of people. We had farmers, we had coal miners, we had oil and gas people, we had environmental people on there. It was a good mix. And then progressively, Governor Wolf took all the energy people out of it. So I was rudely fired 2 years ago, with a quick letter, and you're done. So I like to talk about my time there. But there's many problems with joining RGGI, and I was doing the best I could, and I was very vocal about it. I was on radio stations in the Post Gazette and KDK and things like that. Eventually, they fired me, and I'm glad to be here today to just let the public know how bad this is for Pennsylvania.
Representative, what I guess from the legislature's perspective. Is this something that's being discussed in Harrisburg now? And also, with this money that I guess they're proposing to bring in from this tax, like what one would think if it's geared at environmental or even conservation, like what is the plan? The saying before, like whether it's $1 or $1 million or $1 billion, like how are you going to spend it? So what are they trying to do with this money, or what's the proposal?
Yeah, so a couple things to mention that was brought up, and one I think is huge, right? Pennsylvania is the only energy exporter in this group, right? So all the other states in this group to decline their greenhouse gases, right, are all energy importers, right? So they're already bringing in energy from other states. So they're not impacted as much, right? So they're buying it from other states that aren't part of the initiative, right? So and that's what I always said. What's the difference if you're now going to go buy this energy from states that aren't a part of the initiative anyways, because you're limiting what the states that are in it can do, right? So at the bottom line for the listeners out there, I mean, this is an energy tax. That's all it is. It's basically an energy tax. If you produce energy in the state of Pennsylvania, you're going to be taxed, right? And I have so many issues with it. And it is something we've been battling over the last few years in the legislature with Governor Wolf. Mainly one, because of what I said, it's a tax, right? But it's a tax that was unilaterally implemented. I didn't get a vote on whether we entered RGGI or not. Nobody in the General Assembly got a vote whether we entered RGGI or not. The governor just unilaterally did it, which is why it's tied up in the courts right now. Okay, so there's a chance we may not end up being in it, but the governor did declare that we are a part of this group of states. So not only did I not get a vote on it as your representative, right? So and I always laugh about it, right? Because you think about the founding principle of this country was taxation without representation, and that's exactly what's happening, right? 2023, we are now going against our founding principles of this entire country of being taxed without representation, which I need to add that the other 11 states that are part of this initiative all entered it with legislative approval, which I may not agree with being a part of RGGI, right? But at least those other states that are in it did it with the approval of their legislature and then had it signed into law by their governor. So they did it the right way. They did it through the legislative process. And real quick, just a couple things that I want to point out about just how fundamentally wrong entering this agreement is, right? With our state's constitution and the federal constitution. So we look at our state's constitution, Article 2, Section 1. The legislative power of this Commonwealth shall be vested in a General Assembly which consists of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Okay, that means that all laws in this Commonwealth need to be created in the Senate or the House of Representatives. It's pretty clear, right? Article 3, Section 10 of our state's constitution makes this even more illegal. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose amendments as in other bills. It raises revenue. This is the questions that I brought out. You are bringing revenue into our Commonwealth, right, by taxing energy producers. Yet there was no bill created in the House of Representatives for that. The Senate's not even allowed to do that. Only the House of Representatives is able to introduce legislation for revenue. And one more, our United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 10 states, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, enter any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power without the approval of Congress. Okay, so here we are, 11 states just made a compact to raise energy prices together, and there's no congressional approval. So on so many levels, I am so adamantly against this. On top of the political and economic ramifications, I mean, energy prices are soaring. Why? When you are producing more energy in this state of Pennsylvania, why would you want to handicap yourself? Even the governor himself years ago stated how clean Pennsylvania has become in producing energy and said that it wasn't necessary to join RGGI. And for political and only political reasons did we join this pact.
Well, I definitely think that's an eye-opener for everybody listening and watching. Wow. For me, it's pretty black and white that we're headed down a perilous path with this. But also, I said this before about how you're going to spend it, and that's something that like scares the bejesus out of me, because I see how we spend money now, and it's like goes into these empty black hole programs. Everybody sits here and talks about conservation and environment, but like the most basic things don't get done in today's society. From a political, like people will use it as a from different sides of the aisle will say, oh well, we need money to go towards environmental stuff. Well, what are you actually doing? Like, what are we doing with the money? Like, holy smokes. Planting trees alone is actually a good thing. Like how many trees are we planting in the Commonwealth? Game Commission has different programs for actually sapling tree programs. I have kids coming to the farm that never used a shovel before through the Washington County probation program. I have kids that never picked up a paintbrush before. I have kids. So you sit here and think of things. I just start thinking like, well, heck, send inmates, send even kids that are trying to learn something, send them around the counties and plant trees, do different things, green spaces, do things to make the world a better place. If that's really where put your, I guess, my opinion, I mean, clearly it looks like this is all completely and utterly wrong, but also put your money where your mouth is. Like if the environment is something that we all truly care about, then the people making these proposals should say, hey, then we should try to do these things and try to make the world a better place. But that's clearly not the case at all.
If I could drive home what Ryan was saying, he didn't get a vote. Nobody in the House of Representatives or the state Senate got a vote. Okay, it was all Governor Wolf's dictatorship of pushing RGGI down everyone's. But interesting enough, I got 2 votes. I get to vote on it twice. One is a member of the Citizens Advisory Council, DEP, and one is the Environmental Quality Board. Okay. When I said before that we had a good mix of people, there's 18 members of both boards. Okay. The first vote we made, it was 13-5 or whatever the final number is against RGGI. Okay. And then the Environmental Quality Board was very similar. So we shut it down. That's when Governor Wolf came in and got rid of all of us energy people. And then the next time they voted, it, of course, passed with flying colors. So we're talking about lack of representation. There you go. What's interesting with RGGI, the oil and gas, and I'm in the oil and gas business, we do a really good job. We've got the DEP working right next to us. We got federal people working next to us. We got the Game Commission when we're on game lands, when we're drilling. We do everything the right way. But it's interesting enough, in Pennsylvania, without RGGI, we cleaned up our environment in the last 15 years better than any of those 11 states combined. And they don't drill. But they haven't cleaned up their own backyards, and we have. And if you look at what the standards are for RGGI, they're so low that we surpassed those standards 7-8 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a point that I always wanted to make was, why do you want to handicap energy producers in the United States of America when we produce some of the cleanest energy in the entire world, right? But we all live on the same planet, right? Mm-hmm. We shut down energy producers here in the United States. Where are we buying energy from? China? You think they care about the environment in China? Look at it over there. Russia? You really want to rely on Russia for energy? I mean, but that's what we're doing. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous.
Well, killing jobs is certainly a no-go right out of the gate for anybody with common sense. But the policy just seems honestly kind of insane right out of the gate. And I came from the coal industry. And I watched what extra layers of government, bureaucracy, executive orders did to the coal industry. Now, yeah, coal's still surviving, but, we were talking earlier, Mark, about how just what it's done, devastating communities. I mean, look at all the communities across the country that are in shambles from infrastructure. Look at old coal mining towns. We were talking about how Act 13, when the gas industry did come to Pennsylvania, Act 13 has been a really great piece of legislation because it's kept the money in the local communities, into the counties, and into the Commonwealth. And I think there's something to be learned from that with keeping money local. Because back to the whole Reggie conversation, when money goes into government's black belly, God only knows where it's going to go, and that's the sad part of it is like, I love that about Act 13 is like it's going back where it came from. Right. And I think taxation going back to, personally, I feel that money going back to the people is the best way to keep it because now you have money for sidewalks and infrastructure and whatever you need. You're not having to go beg the government for grant money and then jump through a million. You know how it is in Harrisburg, Ryan. I mean, they say that grants are fair, but we don't. I mean, anybody that's been through the processes and procedures understands it's not the case.
Yeah. So I have to mention that's why I've been so adamantly against the implementation of a severance tax, right? Because we have an impact fee, or it should be called impact tax, right? Mm-hmm. And that money from the impact fee stays local, right? Mm-hmm. But so why do you think representatives from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia want to get rid of the impact fee and want there to be a severance tax? It's not for, they wave a flag like it's for environmental justice or environmental. It's not. It's because they want a piece of the money. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. They don't care, but they can't stand that there is a large pot of money out there being produced by energy producers that is staying local to rural areas. And they can't stand it. That's the main reason why so when you hear a push for a severance tax, it's not to get at the people, drilling wells. It's at us. It's at rural Pennsylvania. It has nothing to do.
It's repairing the roads that we do some damage on the roads, and mm-hmm. we get right back in there and pave them. Things like that. Act 13, for the listeners that don't know, in Washington County, we were the #1 county. We were the #2 county in drilling the volume of gas right after Susquehanna County, which we spend a lot of time in. But we were #1 last year and over $10 million for Washington County. I'm not sure what Fayette County was. I think there was a couple million, and certainly mm-hmm. not as much. But it's interesting. It's over $1 billion in the last 10 years that our industry, the oil and gas, through Act 13, an impact tax, right? Mm-hmm. And thank God it goes to those local areas that are affected. No doubt. It's a shame when I hear about more severance tax, that comes on every year. Yeah,
and another point to make that you'll often hear people say, well, Pennsylvania is the only natural gas producing state that doesn't have a severance tax. Yeah, but we don't have a severance tax on any of our commodity industries, right? So is that what you want? You want a tax on coal? You want a tax on timber? Tax on stone quarries? Because we don't have that in Pennsylvania. Right. So what's next? So why are you just going to pick on one industry, right? Because I guarantee you have a severance tax on gas. The next is going to be a severance tax on timber. The next is going to be a severance tax on coal. The next is going to be a severance tax on stone. I guarantee it.
Well, what we do have that Texas doesn't have and all the other oil, natural gas and oil producing is we have the highest corporate tax in America. So all these oil and gas companies, whether they're in Delaware, wherever they're paying that corporate tax in Pennsylvania, which is huge, and it's more than Act 13. And the other thing that most of the other states don't have is personal income tax. So all these investors in these wells, the mm-hmm. big oil and gas guys, have to pay that income tax back to Pennsylvania. Those two things put us on equal flooring with the states that do have severance taxes.
Yeah. And just one more note to dive into the weeds a little bit about the way that a severance tax is set up and the way they wanted to use the funds, right? So it sounds good, like, okay, we want to use funds for education, right? I mean, you bring in money for a severance tax, put it in the general budget, we use it for education. Well, that's fine, but you shouldn't have dedicated, you shouldn't rely on a severance tax from a commodity industry for dedicated funding. And what I'm saying here is, okay, say you get, I'm just throwing out general numbers here. Say you get $50 million. Okay, you bring that in, you put it towards education. Okay, well, what happens 5 years when there's not a lot of drilling, right? You're not bringing in a lot of gas, right? Who's going to make up for that $50 million that you have as a dedicated funding source in that budget?
Well, and that's
us.
Basically, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yes, exactly.
Is exactly what you're doing, and that's Act 13 structurally is actually a tremendous. To your point, it's a tremendous, in my opinion. If we would stretch that out to other industries and commodities, instead of the sales tax, going to Harrisburg, et cetera, and even your federal taxes, like coal goes to the federal government, and then president has to then divvy it back up to the states, et cetera, and then the governor gets it, and DEP gets it, and you see the layers here. Yep. The point is, you have businesses that impact local communities today, even that aren't in the gas industry. Yep. And, to your point, Representative, okay, I got a stone quarry. Well, their sales tax goes to Harrisburg, which then, next thing you know, PennDOT has to request money in their budget to then fix the roads. So at the end of the day, these problems are there, and the money is there today, but we've created such a long process for the money to then try to beg and plead to get it to come back. And it's like, holy smokes, why don't you reward communities and business owners for doing a good job and let the money stay local and let them build their infrastructure and take care of themselves, instead of this convoluted process where we've created 16 steps, to try to get the money back, and then you have to go and fight with the budget to try to get these line items or different things in there to fix roads, or to, oh, hey, PennDOT's got a bridge that's got to be fixed because it's, there's just, money hasn't been addressed for it in so long. It's just, I don't know. We've created so many layers and processes and procedures. And I started the show off with talking about permitting. And I want to circle back to that. When I was talking to the Governor's Advisory Council about that, I said, the first thing you do when you go do a permit is a PNDI application. And they were like, well, what's that? And I said, well, they call it PNDI. I said, but it's a great foundation of what you should do. And they're like, well, what do you use it for? And I said, well, the state and federal government have different properties around not only states but the country, with where there's endangered bats, or where there's an endangered frog, or where there's whatever this may be. Point being, when I laid out about the permits and I started looking at it, I'm like, look how complicated this is. I got to deal with 4 agencies to do the easiest permit in the state of Pennsylvania, which I'm actually getting ready to do a conservation project on a stream. There's not, unless you're going to go and it's not like the government's knocking down your door to be helpful. If anything, it's kind of like, oh, well, to your point earlier, they want this money for conservation or the environment, etc. But I see people doing great things, and it's basically like you're pulling teeth to get them to even to release a penny towards anything that you're doing. I just think that we've created. Act 13's been a good thing. I really think that's a foundational thing when it comes to permitting. Not on permitting, but when you're talking about taxing, it is a tax. But to keep money local, it's huge. Mm-hmm. Because people, I always go back to, I came out of the coal industry. Look at the communities. We gave that money we gave the sales tax to Harrisburg, and the federal coal tax went to the federal government. And drive around southwestern Pennsylvania. Find a flourishing coal mining community. I would challenge anybody.
Not anymore?
Not anymore.
Nope.
And the sad part is Reggie is basically the same thing for the oil and gas industry. Is that the next thing we want, is to go after another industry and to put them out of business? And then we're sitting there saying, oh, well, hey, government, we need money to knock down all these blighted buildings. Hey, government, there's crime now in these communities because, there's a drug dealer that decided to put a meth lab into, broken down house, and then, people were overdosing. I grew up in Marianna, Pennsylvania, and there was a drug dealer from Philadelphia that came to Deemston Borough, because they don't have local police, because they don't have the money, set up shop because he was close enough to 79 and 70 to get to Chicago. And some of my friends died, actually, that I grew up with from overdosing, and that's actually how he got caught. But it's sad because in Southwest PA, you know, we have the infrastructure to travel drugs and different things across the country, but we forget about our own people in our communities, and it's like, oh, let's create another tax, or let's do this, or let's do that. And it's like, to your point about Mark, about you being on that board and then them having you removed, diversity boards with knowledgeable, diverse backgrounds, to me, is huge.
Right.
Because even when I was in the coal mine, there were people that had very diverse backgrounds. We had school teachers that actually worked in the coal mine, like that ended up being high up in the food chain. And I just think it's critical to have diverse views and perspectives when you're talking about boards that are making decisions that can impact the state of Pennsylvania. And when I was doing my interview, when I got up to walk out of the door for the Fish Commission, they said, wow, you really blew us away. You have a very different perspective than most people that we've ever interviewed. And I was like, well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. You don't want people with the same exact ideology making these decisions, because then you're never going to get new ideas. You're never going to be creative. You're never going to be, you know, you got to look at, even with Reggie, look what hasn't worked. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And if severance taxes and some of these taxes have killed other industries and businesses, why would we want to just, I mean, you might as well stick your head in a guillotine, because that's basically what, you know, we as the state of Pennsylvania are doing. But I think definitely education, obviously this show about teaching people, you know, not only right and wrong, but common sense and the repercussions of decisions. The things that get put, you know, Representative, the agreements that are made in Harrisburg behind closed doors don't always end up being honored. I know seems like that's part of what the battle is right now with the state budget, which is certainly a little bit concerning. But I want to shift gears to crop damage and some of the things we've been dealing with here in Pennsylvania. You know, oil and gas is dealing with some issues. The agricultural industry is dealing with some issues. There was the Secretary of Agriculture actually was here recently talking about some programs at Duda's farm, but Duda's was really raising awareness as to crop damage, not only from deer but small game. And why that is alarming and concerning to me is started pulling the data on red tag programs, which, for those that don't know, red tag is run through the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and it's a program to where farmers can basically get these tags throughout I'll call them the out of the hunting season months, to be able to harvest deer. And basically the Game Commission has to come pick it up. The meat goes to a butcher. The butcher, then the meat goes to a food pantry, which is good. At the end of the day, now we have, you know, commodities that we could sell. The problem is we start looking at the data, and it's a vastly underused program. Most counties, the majority of Pennsylvania, the numbers are going down. There's another program called DMAP, same thing. And you start asking these questions about, I saw it at my place personally. We planted a few sunflower fields. It looked like somebody took a laser and just like whacked them right off, just boom, gone. You know, the deer just destroyed them. Why I bring this up, there's been discussions once again, out of the Pennsylvania Senate about Sunday hunting. And for anybody that knows this out there, when you take regulations away or give people more opportunities, it's a good thing, because now people have better chances to go out and to not only enjoy themselves, but it's a better opportunity that somebody can actually fill their deer tag. And I know you and I have talked about this, Representative, in the past about the Sunday hunting. The Farm Bureau, as of today, as a statewide, I know that we support the 3 days, and also for industrial commercial businesses on Sundays, but this isn't me speaking on behalf of the Farm Bureau. This is me speaking on behalf of myself. Is we are the last state, or we're actually the only state with this 3-day nonsense. and basically the NFL owns a day of the week. And I know when I worked in the coal mine, a lot of times Sunday was the only day I had off, and I can't speak for the oil and gas industry, but I know a lot of people there too that work a lot. And, I think as of right now, it's something that's going to come to a head. And is there anything, like, are you seeing out in Harrisburg in regards to, I guess, conversations about crop damage, deer depredation, these programs these programs aren't definitely doing the job that they need to, and is there any like ideas or solutions moving forward?
So I think one of the big things is, I think you mentioned it, is that the red tag program is heavily underutilized, right? And to be honest, you don't really see advertisement to be part of the program. I think that's one of the main issues. I mean, I'm subjected to the articles and information from the sporting community. I'm chairman of the state sportsman's caucus, and until you brought this up, after the Dudas event, and I started thinking, well, unless you're really an insider, you might not even know about the red tag program. I mean, there's people that probably don't even know it still exists, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the Game Commission needs to step up a little bit in that regard and getting that out there and working, with organizations like the Farm Bureau and advertising it and let them know that program is readily available. The other thing is the decline in hunters in Pennsylvania, right? It's an issue, and that's why the debate of Sunday hunting is brought up. And as you mentioned, we have the 3 days now, but it's at the point that we're losing so many numbers, especially youth hunters, that you have to reanalyze this, right? And I know from personal experience, having 2 young kids, the difficulty of being able to take them out on a Saturday when they have other things going on, mm-hmm. right? And, whether it's baseball or soccer or softball or golf, they got stuff going, all these programs at school. It's just a changing of the times, and why not give that availability for a family to be able to go out on a Sunday? I mean, look, the biggest concern was always rifle season when I talked to farmers. Well, it's already here. I mean, bear season and deer season, that opening weekend are probably 2 of the busiest days in the woods, and they already exist. So if we're looking especially at small game opportunities for kids, or a day to take them out archery hunting in the fall, which is, that's not going to have an impact on any farmer, someone archery hunting. Small game has even less of an impact on it. So the biggest impact to the farming community is already happening, right? The other stuff it will have minimal impact. And again, you have to be able to give these kids an opportunity. And just to mention one more thing, something I brought up to the Game Commission multiple times, I'm still disappointed in it because I've been bringing it up for years, and that's access to their game lands, right? One major problem that we see is why people get out of the sport is just access to good hunting spots. There's more posted land now than ever. I see more purple trees and yellow posted signs than ever. We can get into the reasonings behind that, but it exists. It's a reality. We have thousands of acres of game lands, and what do? They lock and block the access to the game lands. I mean, I look at the one just right here in Fayette County, Game Lands 51. We have a camp right next to it, and I laugh at the fact that there are roads that go through this giant game lands. And they're locked. You have no access to them. And their reasoning to me was that some people want to be able to walk out and not be around other hunters, which I understand. Even off of the road, there's still plenty of room when you have thousands of acres of game lands to be able to access. So that's one thing. I think we're at the point, at a minimum for youth, we have to have Sunday hunting. And 2, the Game Commission has all this land. They need to open it up for hunters to use. It should be promoted to use. And, one other thing that they mentioned was, it's harder for them to patrol that area. But, regardless of how many game wardens they have, they are responsible for patrolling the entire state of Pennsylvania. That doesn't change whether they open those gates or not. In the summertime, I could see maybe closing it. They don't want kids going back there to party. But at a minimum, during hunting seasons, we should have full access to the game lands.
Well, I definitely think that when you talk about wardens, I know that in the past the criminal trespass laws have been a reason as to why people have started more posted signs, etc., and not because necessarily that they can't catch somebody and turn them in. The bad part is the Game Commission, to your point, we don't have enough officers, so there might be somebody 2 counties over, which brings the question where I know for a fact we're the only state with a Game Commission and Fish Commission. I was actually out in Idaho, out near Yellowstone, and they actually it was called the Department of Parks and Wildlife, and it was basically, it would have been like an umbrella, basically under DCNR. But the point is, during hunting season, what the heck is the Fish Commission doing?
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that, and it's not. I mean, I have nothing but respect for our wards in both commissions, both Fish and Boat and Game. They do an excellent job. Nothing but the utmost respect for them, but there's no reason they shouldn't be actively enforcing both game laws, and it should be a combined agency without doubt. I mean, it should just be separate divisions. It should be a division of Game, division of Fish and Boat under Pennsylvania Wildlife. That's what it should be.
And I don't see any reason that necessarily that anybody's losing a job, but it's like, why do you need 10 cars when you could get away with 3, if that makes sense? Like, why? Yeah. You have all these extra fleets of vehicles, all these extra buildings. We've now learned because of COVID even about how you can do co-op spaces with businesses. I would question even, you were saying about good hunting spots. What are they doing with all this oil and gas money from these game lands? I don't even know how many acres it is. It's got to be millions of acres in the whole state. Where is that money going? Because like I've driven by some of these game lands. If they brush hog, that's probably pushing the limit. So it doesn't give. They should be promoting the fact that, hey, because of Act 13, we were able to put back into the game lands, or we were able to do this, or we were able to build habitat and conservation things. You don't ever hear about that.
Actually, the royalties that DCNR is making is somewhere around between $300 and $350 million a year. Mm-hmm. That's just royalties.
And I think that's really important because the way I see it is most people, for example, that go to the parks are people that, not everybody, but a lot of people live in cities, etc., and they want to go camping for the weekend. Well, they are touching Act 13. They are touching the benefits of oil and gas. They are leaving the city and getting to go to those areas and to enjoy it. Same thing with the game lands. Hey, oil and gas has now positively benefited the bank account of the Game Commission. The Game Commission's putting the money back in for out sportsmen. And I think that's the travesty is like they're getting this money, and I definitely, from what I'm seeing, there's definitely a mismanagement. There's a lack of promotion with these programs. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but I mean, you got to have a sincere business conversation at times and say, like, are we doing the best that we can? And I think we have humongous amounts of crop damage. We are not allowed, the number of kids going to the outdoors is less and less and less. The number of people doing drugs and going to crime and other things is going up. There's all these correlating factors. I'm not saying one is exactly the solution for all, but you start looking at everything and it's like, well, what are we doing? And I think I've told you about this story before, but I'm trying to get a permit to be able to shoot hawks at my property. Back in March of this year, I had 12 hawks hovering the farm at one time. That many. Insane. USDA federally did a study approximately 20 years ago. That was the last wildlife assessment. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Agency federally, they rely on that assessment for them to make laws, rules, and regulations. But point being, last week I'm coming here to do the show. In Brownsville, a humongous black bear ran across the highway. Now, outside of me coming on the show and conveying that information, there's no like app I can get on my phone. There's no way to just like you would representative like with, you know, your trail cameras, etc. Like we need a way to be the sportsmen, the outdoorsmen, the oil and gas industry, the people that are out in the communities, the agricultural community. There should be a way that we could share information. Hey, saw the bald eagle's nest here. Hey, saw a bobcat here. Hey, there's 100 deer in the field at this location, because boots on the ground is always the way to do it. Why do the USDA wanted to charge me. They said, hey, we can come out and we'll harvest those hawks for you. I said, oh, okay, that'd be awesome. I said, well, they're like, but there's a fee associated with it. And I was like, well, what's the fee? They said for a staff person to come out and check the traps every day for a year, it would be $120,000. I was like, how in the world? I was like, those are some expensive hawks.
You know, I think about the war on natural gas or the war on American energy independence. It's also the war on the American sportsman. You know, we live in Pennsylvania here. We got Pittsburgh to the left and Philly on the right or the east, you know, and we got Alabama in between. It's all red, you know, but we don't have enough Alabamans, right? And, you know, these rules are being made up from Allegheny County and Philadelphia and Harrisburg and Scranton to an extent. You know, and where's all this activity happening in these rural counties like Fayette, like Washington, and through it all?
Well, and I think, you know, you talk about, you know, the different, go back to Act 13, and these people out of the cities, trails. There's Greenways. Act 13 actually has a fund in Harrisburg. It's called the Greenways and Trails. So, like, they're tapping things now. They're doing things. But I think a lot of people within, not only within the agencies, and maybe this is designed to be this way, if you keep people ignorant to how the money's being spent, you know, people kind of are unaware. But the benefits of the drilling industry when it comes to, I would say, the bank accounts of the Game Commission and also DCNR are tremendous. And I'm just not seeing, to your point, Representative, if kids are not going outside and we're seeing these problems with wildlife and we're not communicating where we stand with things, it just, you kind of have to, even in business, Mark, I know you do this. If something's going wrong, do you continue to do it?
No.
No. You stop and say, hey, we need to have a reassessment here and, like, look, how can we fix this? And then you fix it and you move forward. And then obviously you hope you don't make the same mistake twice. But at the end of the day, whether it's talking about Reggie, whether it's talking about the budgets, whether it's talking about agricultural damage, Sunday hunting, we have a lot of great things in Pennsylvania now. And number one, we don't want to create rules and regulations to stymie ourselves or to hurt business. And also things like Sunday hunting, where we need to cut the red tape, or if we need to make permits easier for people, for businesses, etc., we need to do that. But I really appreciate both of you coming on today. It's been an honor and a privilege, and hopefully you both will come back in the future and we can continue other conversations. But
can I throw in a free plug if I could?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're here with John Gallo. Came down. John Gallo is the founder of American Oil and Gas Alliance, and I'm the president of it. Just listeners, go to Oil and Gas Alliance, AmericanOilAndGasAlliance.com or .org to learn more about us. But we're here to fight for oil and gas and for freedom here in Pennsylvania.
Fantastic. Well, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Thank you both. MarianaOutdoors.com. Come check us out. We are now officially open for upland bird hunting. Trout fishing starts October 6th. Have a great day. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That's been the Great Outdoors Show here on WMBS. It's cloudy and 66 outside.